Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to begin looking at the inference section. Okay, again, we're only going to take to the end of this term to complete this project. But that's easily doable because in the inference section, in the stats section, we're not going to be focusing so much on learning new math to do, right? You're not going to do all the mathematics like you had to do with the probability section. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to use technology to do most of the mathematics, but we need to understand what those numbers mean. Because it's not good enough to just be able to add, subtract, multiply, and divide, or use calculus to find the acceleration rate, unless you can describe what's happening. One of the reasons we learn mathematics, because we're not going to make little mathematicians out of all of you, but one of the reasons we want you to learn mathematics is so that you can understand the world in which you live. And a big part of that world uses statistics, right? You've all seen ads. 37% of the people in New Zealand do this, right? Whatever. And so we use statistics in lots of different ways to try to influence what you do. Okay? Have you ever seen an ad that said, 97% of the people prefer this toothpaste, and so you think, that must be the best toothpaste, right? Is that necessarily true? No, absolutely not. Okay, so we want to be able to look at statistical data, gather some statistical data, and then be able to analyze it. And so that's the focus of this particular section. So what I want to do first is I want to go through the standards so that you'll understand exactly what it is that you're going to be doing for this particular assessment. Okay? So let's look at that. Have them here somewhere. There we are. Okay, so here are the achievement standards for 2.9, right? Level 2, 4 credits, an internal, so this is not a plaything. 4 credits, that's a lot, right? So, for the different levels, for achievement, use statistical methods to make an inference. So you're just going to make a judgment based on statistical data. With achievement with merit, use statistical methods with inference and justification. This is why I think this is going to happen based on the material we saw. And then finally, use statistical methods to make an inference with statistical insight. After analyzing the data, this clearly shows, et cetera, right? You refer to the data and you go back and make sure that you understand and can explain where the numbers and why you made the inference you did, okay? So what you're going to be doing is carrying out investigations, but you're not going to actually do the investigation. We're going to have some data for you, and you're going to use data from something that's already been done. So you don't have to go out and design an experiment and perform the experiment. We get to do that next year. That's what year 13 does. Okay? So you're going to make inferences from surveys. So you're going to be looking at lots of data and doing the mathematics with it, but then you're also going to be making inferences from those. Then you're going to be using statistical methods to make an inference, and we'll talk a lot about what that means. And look at number 3, very important. Number 3 shows you pretty much what your assessment will look like. You're going to use the statistical inquiry cycle to make an inference involving posing an appropriate investigative comparison question from a specific set of data. I wonder if year 13 students at Queen Margaret College are taller than students at whatever, right? So you've got to be very, very specific about the information that you're given and the question. And we'll look at several of these to do this and talk about how that works, right? Any math there? No, right? So, and it's a question that you're going to get, so your opinion and your prediction are yours. So then you're going to select random samples, and we'll talk about random samples and how they're derived. So if I was going to pick a random sample, that means everyone has exactly the same opportunity of being chosen. Okay? All right? Then we're going to just use the appropriate displays and measures, and they will be the only ones we talk about as we go, right? So you will know exactly which ones to use, which measures to use. Discussing sample distributions, in other words, how was the data distributed? Okay? And we'll talk about variability, and including the variability of estimates. Then you're making your inference. This is a big part of it. Making your inference and communicating findings in a conclusion is the really big part of that. Okay? So what I want to do is I want to show you a couple of exemplars, a low achieved and a low excellence one. So you can kind of see the difference between them and see kind of the minimum stuff you need to have and then what would happen when a little higher. So let's look at one of those. This one was the low excellence one. You might as well always aim for the top one first, right? Yeah. So she looked at this student looked at this group of students, boys and girls, and was thinking about, do they need to have different size uniforms based on for boys than they had for girls, based on how long the arms of the uniforms had to be. Okay? And so she had the set of data, and so she asked her questions. For students who completed this survey, I wonder if the median arm span. Do you see that phrase, I wonder? If you don't have it, it ain't happening. Is that how you talk all the time? I wonder? No. But anyway, it's important. And so we make sure they're going to have certain terms that you're going to see. And so she asked what she's wondering. If the median arm span of boys is greater than the median arm span of girls. And notice that she was very specific about what grades, right? And the gender, the population, very specific. And then she gives a prediction. I think that the median arm span of senior boys will be greater than the median arm span of senior girls, right? And then she says why. Some information about why she thinks that. She backs it up with some research and data. Okay? And then she says, why would you research this? Someone who would benefit from the result would be a school blazer manufacturer, right? Because they need to know, do they need to make different sizes for different genders, etc. And then you'll see she's a random sample of 50 for each group. So she talks about her sampling and how many people were in the sample. Then you'll see that she did a box and whisker plot and a dot plot. So those should be familiar with you. I've been assured that most of you have used NZ Grapher before. You'll be using it now to be able to analyze this data and build these plots. So you won't have to graph them by hand. You'll be using the data. Then she put in the chart of all of the significant data points, right? Minimums, the lower quartile, the median, the upper quartile, the maximums, the mean, standard deviation, and the number of people studied. All of that data can be pulled straight from New Zealand Grapher, NZ Grapher, or your graphing calculator. Okay? But you need to know what each one means, but you won't have to calculate every one of those. Okay? Then you're just going to see that from the graph, she talks about from the graph what she noticed. Quite a good long explanation, right? Then she compares the upper and lower quartiles and makes her final conclusion. Right? Very well written, lots of detail. Now let's look at the low achieved one. Again, the student asked the question, I wonder, right? This time she's talking about being able to stand on one leg longer and makes her prediction. But notice that it's all in the first paragraph. It's just one paragraph with all of that in it, right? Now, she had all the data, but it's just as simple and small as you can get, right? So if you have everything, but you don't elaborate on it or give details, then you can still pass, but not as well. She said, I'll use simple random sampling to select 30 male and 30 female. So she talks about how she's going to sample and how many she's going to have. So that's just like the other one. But, of course, just one quick sentence. Then, straight on into the graphs. Notice here that the graphs are overlaid, too. She has them both, but one is overlaid. In NZ Grapher, you can just make them do that high so you can separate them. The other student had the graphs separated so they were easier to read and easier to see. I think it's something to think about. Then she talks about the data, but notice there aren't any nice charts here, right? Just talking about the data. If you're looking at numbers, would it be easier to read them from the chart or just pull them out of a paragraph? Yeah, if you have a chart, you really can focus on what those numbers are, yeah? So I would think about that. And then again, she finishes every detail, talks about the sample statistics, and why it would be different if she used another sample, and then she makes her conclusion. Just not as much detail, right? But everything, all the basic minimums are there, okay? So that should give you some idea of what we're going to be doing. So you're not going to be actually doing lots of math, but you're going to have to understand the math in order to be able to answer the questions, right? Okay? So what I want to do is, the first thing in your book, if you'll notice, if you look at your booklet, the very first thing is a page with a couple of formulas on there, all right? Again, NZ Grapher and your calculator can do these formulas for you, and we'll give you this information, but you need to be familiar with them to know what the types of things you're going to be given what's called an informal confidence interval, right? The first one did not do that. She still passed, but she didn't do that. The second one with the excellence did. Okay, just to be sure you can be confident in your conclusions. And then the interquartile range, that's incredibly important. You have to have that. But again, you're not going to have to memorize that formula because you're going to be doing the math using the technology. Then, the next page, super important, the glossary. You're going to make your own glossary of key terms, and this is going to be your homework between now and the next time we talk about this, which is not going to be Monday because we're going to be doing what on Monday? The calculus assessment, right? So we have that test on Monday. So this will be the next time. The next time we meet, I want you to have this glossary filled in. All right. Most of the terms are defined in the book, so you just have to find them. If you don't find them, then you can use the internet, use internet sources, etc. Try to find, though, if you're going to do that, try to find the simplest, most direct definitions possible. You don't want a whole page of definition for this, right? So make sure that you're very careful about that. Okay, so let's talk for a minute about what statistical inference is. It's very easy. You're just talking about the process of analyzing sample data and inferring what one might see in the population. So in other words, we're going to ask a question, we're going to survey people, right? And then we're going to look at the results and then compare them. So we're going to have two groups of people. So like for the example they gave you, they had the boys and the girls in the school, right? Two different groups of people. They took the measurements of all of their arm lengths and then compared the two to see if indeed there was a difference between the two arm lengths. Okay? Again, you're not going to be pulling data for yourself. You don't have to do the surveys or create them. We're going to give you the material, and you're going to work from there. Look on page 7 there, the purpose. We'll talk about one of the things that is going to be really important for you is to have all of these pieces in your report. So first, the problem. You need to understand and define the problem. In other words, what are we trying to answer here? What are we trying to get at? Because if you don't have a question to answer, then there's no point in your research, or there's no point in doing the experiment, right? So that's your I wonder, okay? Then we want to know how we're going to go about answering the question. Could I just go over here and ask these two girls what they think and that's enough? Nope. You're going to have to get a random sample of people and ask their opinions or do their measurements or whatever. Okay? So then you're going to plan what to measure and how are you going to measure it, right? The tallest buildings in New Zealand. You going to get a tape measure? No, right? So you've got to be careful about what and how you're going to measure. The study design. Who are you going to get to collect the data from or what types of data? The recording. Okay? If I just write it on the back of an envelope somewhere willy-nilly, then you're not likely to have good data recording, right? So make sure your recording is very accurate. And collecting the data. If I'm going to ask someone to judge a person, so I'm going to show you a photograph and I want you to judge their age based on the photograph. Would I just show everybody this photograph and say, okay, what do you think? And you say it out loud, and you say, what do you think? Say it out loud. What's going to happen? You're going to say, if you said 40 years old, then how many other people are going to say 40? Yeah, you bet. So make sure that you're talking, when you're collecting your data, it's very important. But again, this data is going to be collected for you, but you need to make sure you say something about how the data was collected. Okay, as far as the data collection, super important. If you don't collect all the numbers you need, right, you can't leave anything out. Managing the data, making sure that you have everything in the right order. Say you just have these little cards with all their arm links on them, and then you drop them, and you don't know which ones were male and which ones were female. Is your data set any good anymore? No. Absolutely not. Okay. Then you're going to do your analysis. This is where the calculator and the NZ grapher are going to come in. You're going to sort the data, construct tables and graphs, and then you're going to look for patterns in the data. Okay. And then finally, the conclusion, where you're going to interpret. You do your interpretation, draw some conclusions, and see if that question being answered led to new questions, right? Something that you might not have thought of. It might lead to new questions. And that will give you all of the pieces that you're going to need for working your assessment. Okay? So what I'm going to have you do now is I want you to look at some of the statistics that starting in this, they start on page 8 and then moving forward. I don't want you to do all of these, but I want you to be comfortable enough using the technology, using your calculator, knowing the keystrokes, right? You don't want to be learning this at the end to do most of these, okay? So finding these, the minimum, lower quartile, median, upper quartile, etc. And they even give you the directions on how to use your calculator to do that. And you'll notice that the calculator tells you every single piece of the information that they want you to use, right? Okay, so I want you to practice doing a few of those. You don't have to do all of those. There are several data points. Then on plotting data, which starts on page 12, right? I don't want to focus on plotting this data by hand, because you're not doing that. Right? Instead, what I want you to do is take that data and use NZ grapher, and just to practice and make sure that you're very familiar with using the NZ grapher, how to enter the numbers and how to enter treatment, non-treatment, etc. So make sure that you can make those dot plots. Okay? So I want you to make the dot plots. Then the next section is about box plots. You need to understand each one of those. You will have defined those terms, making your glossary. And so you can define, and so you make sure you understand what a minimum is. But you've heard these words before. What's the minimum, you think? The smallest number. And then these things are usually broken up into 4 sections called what? Quartiles, right? Which one is right smack in the middle? The median, right? And then you have a lower quartile and an upper quartile. Know where those are measured. And finally, you have a maximum, which simply means the what? The highest number. Okay? So, most of you know this language pretty well. And so what I want you to do in between here, now and then, is to learn how to make sure you use the calculator to get some of that summary statistics. And put things into NZ grapher so that if we have any questions about how it works, then you can fix that. Has there anyone here who's never used NZ grapher before? Okay, All right. Well, here's the bad part. I haven't either. So hopefully you have somebody nearby, because they didn't raise their hands, who you can get some assistance from. All right? Is that all right? And if not, I'm sure there are some tutorials for it that you can look. It's a pretty simple program from what I've seen. Okay? Now, you also have another goal. And that's to teach me how to use NZ Grapher. All right? So I want to see what you've done. So be prepared to explain how you entered your information and what you got and how you got your information. Okay? Because I need to learn it as well. Sound good?
Yeah.
Sound doable? We got 2 weeks? Yeah? All right. Excellent.
Are we doing it?